What's up, everybody? Cradle fans, Progression Fantasy fans, all fans, only fans. This is the Information Requested podcast. I am your host, Bamfilosophy, whatever you want to call me. I also go by Garrett. I'm doing this a solo this time because Remixt is in process of moving to Germany, and he's been in process of moving to Germany for a while. They screwed up his paperwork. And all my German viewers out there, you might find this to be a little bit funny. But apparently, in other parts of the world outside of the U.S., people don't... There's no, expectation of working all the time, which I think is somewhat healthy. But it's also kind of hard to make stuff happen. And his paperwork has kind of fallen apart. Basically, he just had to get it resubmitted. So Remixt will be back. He is trying to remix his location in life by going to Germany because he had a job offer. So congratulations to Remixt. And so I'm going to probably be doing some solo podcasts going forward. I'm going to have guests. I'm probably going to do some more interviews since those went well. But today's episode is a solo cast. It's going to be about my time at DragonCon. If you're watching the YouTube video, you can see my badge. Well, you can see my unsold badge. And then you can see my DragonCon badge. And my unsold badge, which was handed out at the Will Wight Meetup, which I'll talk about, is pretty cool. It has a quote on the back that says, when a traveler cannot find a path, sometimes he must make his own, which is an Elder Whisper quote. So I had Will sign it and quote it from Elder Whisper and from himself. So that's pretty great. DragonCon was a success. Well, first off, let me backtrack a little bit and explain what DragonCon is for those of you who've never been and why I like to go personally. So DragonCon is a place like Comic-Con, however, it's always in one location. So the people that go to DragonCon, you get to see every time that you go. And that's a really powerful thing. DragonCon is unlike Comic-Con in that it is run by fans. It is not run by a corporation. So there are some pros and cons to that. One of the cons being the DragonCon is not as organized or not as well organized as some of your local conventions that are run by a corporation who specializes in such things. The pros being it's always in the same place. The revenue from DragonCon, from 40 to 80,000 fans coming into town for a week on the city is pretty profound. A lot of the restaurants bank on it. A lot of the hotels bank on it, and it's a big deal for the local economy. So the city of Atlanta does quite a few things to cater to the folks at DragonCon, and over the last 30 to 30 plus years of the convention existing, the city and the con have become like one happy family. I'm just going to stop it there. But I like going to DragonCon because it's a central location that's always at the same time every year, the same place every year, that I can meet up with my friends. This year was a little bit different because it was the first year that DragonCon has had the event post-pandemic. So masks were required for all things. You had to show a negative test that was taken in the last 48 hours or show your vaccination papers. I'm not going to get into whether or not showing papers is a thing. I'm just going to talk about how the con went. We're not going to get political on here unless it has to do with cradle politics or progression fantasy politics. Then we can jump in and get juicy. But that has nothing to do with vaccinations. So I'm vaccinated. I got vaccinated back in April. My fiance is disabled and in a wheelchair and would be considered high risk. So we both went ahead and got the vaccination for our collective health. And so we didn't have to worry about anything. So yeah, those are some of the caveats around the con this year. And so I still went. Those caveats and the fact that the virus in general, the Delta variant, was starting to pick up led to my two hotel roommates not going. One of which, his roommate got COVID, so he couldn't go because he was exposed. And it wouldn't matter how many negative tests he got. He was exposed like days before his flight. So he did the responsible thing and stayed back. He was very upset about it, and I feel really bad for him. My other friend made the choice. I would say that he and some people he's around might be considered high risk, and so they didn't want to take the risk, and that's the decision that they weighed. And he's like my best friend, so always going to support him. Wish I could see him. But I flew solo this year. This is a solo podcast, and it's a solo con. So let's talk about each day. And I'm going to get into Reaper. I'm going to get into the announcement. I'm going to get into all that juicy business. But I want to just share like what my con week looked like. So we're going to get into that right now. All right, let us discuss the specifics of DragonCon. So DragonCon is typically Thursday through Monday. You get your badge on Thursday, and then everybody leaves on Monday. I always fly in on Wednesday so that I can check into my hotel, relax, grab a meal with friends, etc., help plan out my week. All the things that one might want an extra day for. I go in early on Wednesday. So it's almost a full week event for me. So that's what I did. I flew into Atlanta on Wednesday using the tickets I'd bought before I knew that my friends weren't going. The hotel I stayed at, I won't even go into it, but if you know, you know. It's a good hotel. I checked in, got my room right away, got my Wi-Fi set up and thrumming. Everything was great. But it was weird to do it on my own. I've been to DragonCon maybe 6 times now, 5 or 6 times. And this DragonCon, I found myself getting lost. Even though I knew where I was going, I still found myself getting lost. It was almost like my subconscious knew I didn't have friends there that were staying with me, so I could get lost more easily. I don't know what to say, but it was still pretty weird. The cool part is that I met up with a bunch of Cradle community members, specifically Hosuke and Not a Committee, or Knack. We call her Knack. They're a married couple. They're awesome. And the last time that they saw me or I saw them at DragonCon was in 2019, and they didn't say hi. Or that's the story I've been telling. According to them, Hosuke tried to say hi, while Knack told them to not bother me, but I didn't hear. And so after the con, they said they saw me, and then I whined about them not saying hi for 2 years. So fast forward. It's Thursday evening, and they hit me up and they say, "Hey, are you busy for dinner tonight?" And I said, "Yes, I'm busy for dinner tonight, but I'd love to meet up after." And then they ran into Sam Wight, Will's brother, and Sam was like, "Hey, I'm about to go eat dinner with Garrett." So they messaged me. We're like, "Come on, you could have told us." And I said, "I didn't know. I'm sorry." Because the Wight family was kind enough to invite me to dinner. Keep in mind, Will's not there. He's busy doing stuff. So this is the Wight family. And they're awesome, and they're lovely, and we had a great dinner. And they asked all about Megan, my fiance. They care quite a bit about her and have always kept up with her progress. So it was nice to sit down and just talk to them about her journey instead of, responding here and there when I would chat with them over time. So that was great. That was a lot of fun. They're great people. Will has an excellent team around him. He's a very lucky guy. Well, then we went to play board games after dinner, which was awesome. It was mainly just Sam and Rebecca, Will's siblings. We went to play, and then Hosuke and Not a Committee hit me up, and they're like, hey, where are y'all? And I didn't look at my phone. So one could say I ignored them in DragonCon 2021. But they found out where we were playing anyways and came and hung out, and that was a lot of fun. The game that was played was called Azul. It is a Portuguese tiling game that I can't imagine why anyone would ever make it. It took me probably 75% of playing the game before I understood it. And I got lucky and had a really powerful setup so that on my final turn of the game, I leapfrogged everyone's scores and won. It was mostly an accident. There was a concept that I misunderstood about the game, or that I mostly misunderstood that I was trying to implement, and by 3/4 of the way in, I realized how wrong I was. But it turned out that this combo I was going for still ended up giving me a lot of points. So I won, and that was great, because the first time and only time I've ever played a board game with the Wights, I came out victorious. So Sam, Rebecca, you're 0-1. You're 0-1. And it feels good to say that. All in all, it was still a blast. Then they left, and I don't remember what Hosuke, Knack, and I went and did after that. We didn't get a game. I think we walked around and chilled. Talked about fantasy fiction, talked about books, all sorts of good stuff. But again, it was only Thursday, I think. Maybe it was Friday. I can't keep my days straight. Either way, it was fun. It was Thursday for sure, because then on Friday we all went. And when I say we all, I mean Hosuke, myself, and Knack. We went to the Mountaindale Press event. Ran into Travis Baldry. Ran into all the Wights. That was fun. But we went to the Mountaindale Press event, and that was cool. Mountaindale is the media publishing company that Dakota Kraut founded with his wife Danielle, and it is the umbrella by which they publish other authors. So Mountaindale Press event was not just a Dakota Kraut event. It was all the authors that could be there and were represented. That was fun. Hung out, got to meet Travis for the first time. Travis and I talked about working out and food. That's what we talked about. And he shared with me his exercise program, which I am now going to start trying to do. So if I start to get thinner in the face and a little bit more muscular in the arms and shoulders, we can thank our favorite voice actor for that. So that was fun. After that, Hosuke, Knack, and I went to the gaming hall and played Settlers of Catan. And it was my first time ever playing Settlers of Catan. And many of you listening are probably groaning, like, how? How could this be your first ever Catan game? And my answer to you is, I don't know. I've always been a video games guy, not always a tabletop, board game kind of guy. I do play Dungeons and Dragons, but I started playing D&D digitally before I've ever played in person. So I'd never played Catan, but they taught me how to play. And even when I had already set up my initial board pieces, I didn't understand some of the game mechanics. And I just, once again, learned as I went. Unfortunately, though, this time I did not come out on top. I made a valiant effort. My main mistake I'm learning is that I didn't upgrade my villages to towns early enough. And so I was stuck with a ton of roads and a ton of settlements. But I was like chilling at like 6 to 8 points because I had the card that you get when you build the most roads. The point of the game is to get to 10 points, and it's hard to get to 10 points. Also, it's also hard when Knack is like attacking you for all your resources every time she rolls a 7. And so she targeted me, and she showed prejudice against me in favor of her husband. Can't believe that. And she was smart, and she basically surrounded the resources that had the number 8 on them. And I think she also had the resources that had the number 6. So she played a smart game. She ended up getting third out of 3, though, because the winner was Hosuke, who fortuitously drew from, there's like this, I don't know what it's called, but it's like a development card. And he had all these development cards that gave him points that he couldn't show until the very end. And so I can't remember exactly I think he upgraded a settlement. And as soon as he upgraded it, he like threw over his points. It was like, I win. And then I was sad. It was a well-fought game. It sort of reminded me of the story of Easter Island, where you just use up all the resources until you all fall apart and hate each other. Either way, it was fun. It was good. And this leads us to the end of Friday night, which leads us into the beginning of Saturday, which was dominated by the Hidden Gnome Publishing panel, which was at the hotel I stayed at. This was a good event. It was a great event. It was my favorite event. And the Wights were worried that there weren't going to be a lot of people showing up. This is because this was a COVID con, and many people that they had heard from that were originally planning on going had canceled. Even so, the event was a smashing success. Over 70 people showed up, and probably 30 to 40 people were almost always present for the whole extended event. There were people that came and went as was convenient. For example, Dakota Kraut showed up for a little while, and then he had to leave before the end. A couple other folks from Mountaindale showed up towards the end, and then just a lot of normal Cradle fans. There was a couple people that even recognized me, and that was super fun. So those of you that I met, y'all are awesome. I hope to see y'all again in the future. And if you took pictures with me, please send them my way. I'd love to have those. So that was fun. Now, what happened during the event? Well, first of all, I'll talk about the format of the event. The format of the event was from noon to 2. There was like a round table discussion where everyone could ask Will or Travis questions, and they would answer. And there was some peanut gallery work from the other Wights, and it was a grand old time. And then at 2, there was a break, and when everything resumed, Will and Travis were up on like a podium, and Travis read probably half of chapter 4 of Reaper. They also announced when Reaper is getting published. And if you're just hearing this from me, you're welcome, but you should be paying more attention. Reaper will be available for purchase worldwide on November 2nd. It will be available for pre-order probably a month before that. So look for the pre-orders to hit in very late September or early October. So that's cool. That was a blast. And I'll give a brief little, like, what I remember from what was discussed in chapter 4. I mean, I've talked about it with a ton of people, so it's not going to be that off. But we're at the point now in the fandom where anytime Will does a new event, we're not going to necessarily get new juicy details about the series or about the Willverse. That seemed to be the case for the first 2-hour portion, where people were asking him all sorts of questions about all sorts of things. He did talk about icons a little bit, that there are effectively an infinite number of potential icons that one could manifest. There are other icons that are much more likely to manifest and are much more likely that are likely far more powerful. For example, if you existed in an iteration that had guns, projectiles, like combustible projectiles, a gun icon would be far weaker and less prevalent than a sword icon, because a sword is a concept that exists anywhere that someone can create a sharp object, a sharp metal object. So a sword icon is going to be far more prevalent and potentially far more powerful than something like a gun icon. That was discussed. So that's interesting. But again, mostly common sense and didn't necessarily apply to Cradle or to the most of the Willverse. So that was new. I asked Will if he enjoyed writing Reaper, since he didn't enjoy writing Bloodline, and just to kind of pick his brain a little bit in front of everyone on how his vacation, how his little sabbatical transitioned into the next stage of writing. And his answer was interesting. He didn't just straight up come out and say, "Yeah, I enjoyed writing this time." That wasn't the case. It was a more nuanced answer, and I believe it led to part of what his talking points were for the final, like the panel event that happened later. What he said was that the sabbatical helped him reset at like a human level, that it wouldn't take as much out of him when he had days of writing because he had rested. For example, in the past, when he was writing Elder Empire or Bloodline, Sam might show up at the end of a day of writing and ask him if he wanted to do something, and Will would say, "Go away, leave me alone." Then after the sabbatical, Will was like his normal self after a day of writing. So it didn't take as much out of him. He wasn't running on fumes at the end of a day of writing, which is extremely good. It's extremely good news. What Will did say, though, is that he had hoped that this sabbatical would help him kind of learn how to deal with imposter syndrome. In that every day when he wrote, he didn't think he was writing the latest and greatest piece of, English trash, not like writing. Which is obviously, from an outsider's point of view, ridiculous, since so much of us love his writing. But imposter syndrome doesn't care what anyone else thinks. It's insidious, and it messes with you, and I deal with it myself. Fortunately, I don't care about videos, like making videos and talking to you and have you comment on my face and my content. I don't care. I do this as a way to practice talking in front of a camera, but also to practice making videos. So I don't have imposter syndrome for it, because I don't expect myself to ever be considered good at this. I have imposter syndrome when it comes to writing nonfiction, and I have extreme imposter syndrome when it comes to my attempts at writing fiction. So it was interesting to hear about Will talking about how he has dealt with that for so long, and hoping that this sabbatical was going to help that go away, and then finding out that it's just something he's going to have to deal with. And it's something that a lot of us are going to have to deal with forever. And we learn how to combat that. And I'll talk more to his comments on how he combats that and how I combat that in a couple minutes. The fun part, though, was a lot of people had questions for Travis. This was the first opportunity to ask either Will or Travis live some thoughts. So a lot of people had questions for him on how he came up with different voices for different characters, which led to Travis doing, like, he'd be talking in his own voice, and then he'd switch to Yaren, or he'd switch to Orthos, and like give an example in those voices live. That blew a lot of people away and was a nice treat. We learned, and I don't know if this is something we learned, but it might be new, that Yaren's accent was originally derived from Gal Gadot's accent. How if you hear her speak, you won't necessarily know she's Israeli, but you'll know that she has an accent that could potentially be placed somewhere in that part of the world, which is what Will and Travis wanted for Yaren, or mainly what Will wanted for Yaren. He wanted an accent that was hard to place, that wasn't an obvious facsimile, or I don't even know if that's the right word, but wasn't an obvious caricature of an accent that exists in our actual world. Because she uses a lot of, metaphors and sayings, I think it was Alita from the community asked if there was ever a temptation to make Yaren like a southern accent, or like a country accent, because of all the sayings. And man, Will was very self-aware. He said, hell no. He didn't say hell no. He said, no way would I ever have wanted to do that. So that was cool. Gal Gadot is the voice inspiration for Travis's version of Yaren. That was new for me, so it might be new for you too. Another interesting question that I remember being asked, I think by Alita as well, had to do with Will's ability to write characters that are suffering or dealing with a disability, and the accuracy with which he writes how other characters treat those they consider disabled. Because there's a bit of a difference there, right? Someone could be disabled, but not feel disabled or not act disabled. And then from a different perspective, someone might view someone as disabled that isn't, just because of their perception. Or they might never know someone's disabled and perceive them as, being a non-disabled person, even though they are disabled. And, it was a very complimentary question. And yeah, Will does a great job of that. And Will talked about the thought that he put into it. Will talked about the thought that he put into it and how, he's never had to deal with that himself. And so empathizing in that situation was tough. And he really appreciates that the hard work he put into it was recognized. That was awesome. That question and many more were asked in the preview time. I'm not going to lie, the first 30 minutes of that discussion, I was helping the Wights, put chairs out. The initial amount of chairs that they put in the room was nowhere near enough. So I think the hotel kept, there's just waves and waves of more chairs. So I wasn't paying a whole lot of attention early on. But the grand consensus from those of us that, have read all of the words of Will is that there wasn't a whole lot of new content that was generated in the first section of this event. It was just a great time for people to ask Will questions, whether or not they've been asked before. And again, I might have mentioned this in a past video, but Will is pretty good about ensuring that no one person dominates and asks all the questions. He switches it up. He's very purposeful about calling on people that haven't asked questions before. So we had a wide range of folks asking questions, and that was great. That was really good. So let's transition over to the Reaper section, where he announced Reaper and then Travis read Reaper. And before I get into telling you what was said, this is a spoiler alert coming, not quite yet. It was really cool to see other audience members react to Travis reading, but it was especially cool to see Will react to the audience reacting to Travis. And I can only imagine what that must feel like. You write these jokes, and this is a section that was rife. Had a lot of comedy in it. You write these jokes, these subtle jokes that may or may not hit with some people. But then you have Travis able to pick up on the nuances of that joke and then deliver the joke appropriately while actively reading. Then to have everyone laugh and respond to it, that's cool. It was really cool to witness that, even from the audience. So I can only imagine what it must have been like for Will to experience that. That was awesome. So the contents of what was in chapter 4. Let me set the stage. It starts off from the point of view of of Lyndon's father, Wei Shi Jiran. He's just had a surgery done on his eyes to have remnant eyes, but has an internal monologue about how proud or how he's made the right decision of not letting Lyndon do it, because Lyndon's obviously not skilled enough, that he only allowed it to happen because his wife was able to do the procedure. And he's begrudgingly commenting on how Lyndon must have worked really hard to find the right remnant eyes so that it doesn't change the way that Jiran's able to see. So right off the bat, we see that Lyndon's parents, despite we don't really know where we're at in the timeline, but it somewhat feels like we're shortly after the events of Bloodline in chapter 4, where we have Jiran, he's still an iron, he has new eyes, but he makes a comment that getting the eyes done before advancing to Jade was the right choice because any issues that might have arisen from the eye surgery would be fixed when he advances to Jade. And he's not talking about Jade as if it's like some far off goal. He's talking about Jade like it's a short thing that's about to happen that he's almost been promised. So I found that to be interesting, meaning Lyndon now has enough resources at his disposal that he might have promised Jiran that he could get to Jade. And I come to that conclusion because Jiran is talking about how he didn't let Lyndon do the surgery, which implies that Lyndon offered to do the surgery and Jiran said no, which Lyndon would then be like, are you sure? Because I'm pretty good at this. And Jiran's like, no, I don't care how good you think you are. You're never going to be as good as your mother. She's got a lifetime of experience, blah, blah, blah. Poor Lyndon, right? So that happens for a bit. But the event that's occurring that Jiran is like observing is that the Black Flame Empire has arrived. And they've arrived in force with tons and tons of skyships. Tons of airships on green 1,000-mile clouds. And Jiran is commenting on the grand display of ships. And he's standing next to his wife. And there's a large sacred arts display. The Black Flame Empire, as they approach, I don't know, send out a lot of techniques and create. It's effectively like fancy fireworks in a way. And they describe like, oh, this is pretty cool. This is awesome. Blah, blah, blah. And I can't remember if it was at this part, but Jiran talks about how there's no way that this technique, like grouping of techniques, could have been done without a script. And his mom says, nope, it wasn't done. It wasn't done without a script. It was done by sacred artists. This comment might have been said for both what the Black Flame Empire is doing and the response. But I know for sure it happened with the response to what the Black Flame Empire did. So the Black Flame Empire, they do these fireworks. That's like it's like a herald to their approach. And in some ways, it's like, look how great we are. We're approaching. We hope you accept us. Well, Lyndon, Yaren, and I think Athan. It doesn't explicitly say Athan, but I'm very sure it is Athan. In fact, I'm almost positive it's Athan. That all three of them work together to create a far more impressive, fireworks display. Yaren shoots like a super red beam up into the sky and like makes the clouds go red. Then someone makes gold fireworks, do like an intricate dance. It might have been, I think there were constructs involved. So yeah, Lyndon uses but effectively Lyndon, Yaren, and Athan create this super cool display. They create this like wild Madra show, and they create this Madra tunnel, like massive Madra tunnel for the Black Flame Empire ships to enter. And it was kind of like this welcome wagon type of response. Like, oh, you've shown me your colors. Here's mine. Let's hang out. Let's have a good time. So as the ships approach, we have the Black Flame Emperor, Naru Huan, who flies up looking glorious and powerful, speaks using powerful wind techniques so everyone can hear. Very formal greeting, something like the Black Flame Empire welcomes the Archlord Aurelius. The Black Flame Empire welcomes the uncrowned queen, and then the Black Flame greatly welcomes the Sage of Twin Stars. And the crowd goes wild. And then he's waiting there for a response. And this is where like the funny stuff starts happening, because now we switch to the point of view of Lyndon. And Lyndon's along the lines of waiting on Athan to say something. Yaren looks to Lyndon. Lyndon looks to Athan. Athan's just got this big goofy grin on his face looking back at Lyndon. Lyndon doesn't know what to say. So he flies out, remembers at the last second to use the same technique that Naru Huan is using to speak loudly, and makes this awkward response that surprises Naru Huan. And Naru Huan responds, to which Lyndon's like, I basically give up. I'm just going to invite him in for tea. And so he says something like, Naruwan, will you please honor us with tales of your great empire by coming over here and talking to us? And so then Naruwan's like, okay. He flies over. They stop talking to everybody. Naruwan asks if they can approach so they can give refreshments. And that's what allows Lyndon to say, oh, yeah, come on. And everybody on the ground cheers and freaks out because they're living in like a desolate area that has no water. Cool stuff. So we now have Naruwan and our 3 protagonists hanging out. And Naruwan is still being very formal. He addresses Lyndon and he addresses Yaren and completely ignores Athan. And Yaren and Lyndon are saying, come on, man, just be casual. But then Athan jumps in. He's like, I couldn't help but think I'm being purposefully ignored. And then Naruwan says something like, does this lord speak for you? And it's really funny. Athan acts all butthurt. Lyndon and Yaren don't really know what to say, but then Lyndon comes up with the idea that, hey, Emperor Wan, why don't you just kick Athan? If Athan's been such a bother to you and you want to make us happy, just kick him. Kick him as hard as you want. And then Athan starts to protest, and he's now, I think this is a little bit. And then like mid-sentence, Naruwan just, punts him over the mountains, like Team Rocket off into the distance. And the best part is that right after Naruwan does that, he's like, bring me a dream tablet. I need to record this while it's still fresh. This is like the greatest moment of my life. It was great. And then that's how it ended. So it was chosen for a lack of spoilers. It had some really funny dynamics, social dynamics. And we get to see Yaren and Lyndon uncomfortable with the place in society that their power level grants them, which makes sense considering 3 years ago Lyndon was a copper or an iron and Yaren was a low gold, and now we have an over herald and an over sage. So that's wild. Good chapter. Everybody laughed. The delivery was great, and Travis didn't know about what he was going to read until the night before. So he had no preparation. He had read it at least once because the audiobook recording is done. But, I mean, stellar performance. Absolutely stellar performance. A couple other areas of this that I've glossed over. There was a bit of a transition with Jaron talking to his wife, talking about how he can't believe that Lyndon is as prestigious and important as other people are saying that he is. He comments several times that Lyndon was forcibly advanced and that doing so is obviously a terrible idea because Lyndon's potential is going to be ruined and he's going to be stuck where he is forever. The irony of how wrong Jaron is when he talks about the sacred arts is a constant comedic companion during this section of the book. It was great. But we also have Lyndon's mother constantly reminding Jaron that, hey, I've told you that Lyndon is this strong. I've told you that Lyndon is this impressive, over and over again. And the internal monologue of Jaron is always that if I had the chance, I could be great. My son's a cripple. He's not awesome. But when he sees the fireworks display and then Seisha's drudge is like, nah, that's 4 types of Madra being controlled by 3 people and one of them is Lyndon, and that's how impressive all of that is. And Jaron's like, whoa, maybe my son's important. Especially when the Emperor of Black Flame is so polite and shows him so much deference and honor that Jaron then asks, how large is the Black Flame Empire again? And then Seisha says, very, very large. So again, it's cool. It's unfortunate that Lyndon has to deal with those power dynamic or the family dynamics that are so awkward about how strong he is. And it just goes to show you that like that psychological, what is it? It's like a psychological fallacy or something like that, where you always view people in the light of how you viewed them when you had the most power over them, or when you had the most favorable power dynamic. So like when you have a friend that you grow up with, you're very comfortable with them. I'm not even going to explain it, but it's an interesting thing how Jaron still looks at his kid as if his kid is disabled, even though his kid is like one of the most impressive sacred artists on the planet. It's wild how psychology can blind us to so much. But, I'm not going to dissect this any further. The official transcript will probably be dropped relatively soon, sometime this week. And then you can enjoy it there. I think we're done with spoilers. The only thing I have left is to talk about the rest of my DragonCon trip, which I don't think anyone cares about. So I'll be quick. So that's how Saturday went. A great event. Sunday, I went to see Shang-Chi with Hosuke and Nak. Will also went to see it with his family that day. And it was great. It was really great. There is a nine-tailed fox in that movie. There are a couple other really cool animals that exist in the Chinese web novels. So I recommend you go see it. It's very good. The kung fu or not the kung fu, but the fighting choreography is extremely great. The magic scenes are great. The villain is great. I don't know. It's just a well-written movie. Like they put some real time and effort into doing a good job with this one. So that wraps things up. Monday I left, and now I'm back. It's Wednesday. It's Wednesday, September 8th now. We have almost 2 months until Reaper, so I'll be making some videos. I'm going to be doing some recap videos. I'm going to make like short little, maybe I'm going to attempt to do less than 5-minute. This is a recap of this book. This is a recap of this book. So you'll probably see 9 videos from me at the very least coming up, just to do a recap of each book. That way you can remember the key parts of each book that pertain to later parts of the story or that pertain to important events that may or may not be happening in Reaper, because we don't know yet. But everything that alludes to what might happen in Reaper and beyond, I'll call out in my recap videos. Also, I'll be doing a 10 things I'm looking forward to seeing in Reaper. And then when Reaper comes out, I'll do this is what I thought of Reaper, per usual. As for more podcasts, I'm probably just going to try and do these like once every few weeks on my own if I don't have a guest, just to give y'all an update of like what's going on with me, what projects I'm working on, updates on if my writing is progressing, things like that. And then, of course, if I have any new theories, I'll make theory videos. So that's the future for the Bamfilosophy channel and the future of the Information Requested podcast. So thank you for tuning in, and we will see you next time.